Spain,
Portugal,
the Maldives,
Thailand,
Greece,
Italy,
Turkey,
Bali.
the Caribbean.
These are some countries that are world renowned for being hugely popular holiday destinations for those in need of a well-earned break. Having just met our friends in Guatemala to spend a 10-day holiday with them, we are convinced this Central American paradise can join the A-list countries mentioned above when it comes to thinking about where to go on your dream holiday.
We are Mark and Asa, and welcome to our Something to Remember YouTube channel.
We have gained quite a few new subscribers recently, so we would like to say thank you for subscribing, and we hope that you enjoy the content on our channel. If you're watching this video and you haven't subscribed yet, it would mean the world to us if you would join our community and click the little subscribe button below.
If you have been following for a while, you'll know we have just finished traveling through South America, and now we have made our way into Central America. If South America interests you, be sure to check out the various videos we have posted about the best places to go down there. Back to Guatemala. This country has been on our radar for a long time, and we were especially excited about visiting because we had arranged to meet some of Mark's friends from home there. We did have some extra days at the beginning before they arrived though, and we used that time to see two places we absolutely love.
The first city we landed in was Chichimula, but to be honest, that's not a place that we were recommended to stay so long, so from there we just hopped on a bus and headed to Flores in the north of the country.
The most likely scenario is that you will fly into Guatemala City Airport, and from there you can take a shuttle service to Flores. But we'll talk about shuttle services and transport in Guatemala a little bit later.
So what's in Flores, you ask? Well, the tiny town of Flores is pretty much just a quirky little island where you can catch sunsets galore and eat delicious tacos, but those aren't the reasons we were there. Around 45 minutes northeast of this town lies one of Guatemala's major tourist destinations, the ancient Mayan city of Tikal.
Now, a popular way to see Tikal in all its glory is to do a sunrise tour, for which you leave Flores on a shuttle service at 3 a.m. But having just spent 8 hours on the bus from Chiquimula to get to Flores, we didn't have the energy for that the next day.
So we're in the national park now, walking towards the Grand Plaza, the big thing that everyone wants to see. We were kind of expecting a more touristy vibe, but we're actually here on these paths on our own. We didn't get up at the crack of dawn to go like we usually do, so we're here at 10 past 12. And usually, from experience, these kind of places at 10 past 12 in the afternoon are a lot busier than this, so far so good.
In fact, at one stage we find ourselves all alone on the platform overlooking the main ruin of Tikal, known as the Temple of the Great Jaguar.
The Mayan civilization existed in areas now known as Southeast Mexico, all of Guatemala and Belize, and the western portions of Honduras and El Salvador.
On our recent travels, we have visited a lot of ancient Mayan ruins, including famous sites like Chichen Itza in Mexico, Copan Ruinas in Honduras, and Xunan Tunich in Belize. We can safely say Tikal was our favorite Mayan city to explore, which is quite the compliment considering Chichen Itza is a new wonder of the world. Incredibly, the tallest temple in Tikal, Pyramid 4, is twice as tall as the temple in Chichen Itza. You can even climb to the top of that temple, and from there you can see the whole city, which, for the most part, is still engulfed by the sprawling jungle around it.
This really is such an impressive place. We found it to be vast, authentic, and we really got a feel for how life may have been back then for this fascinating ancient civilization.
One more interesting fact about Tikal is that it was the inspiration for Mel Gibson's movie Apocalypto, and if you haven't seen that movie, I would suggest watching it because it's about a young man trying to escape from a Mayan kingdom, but it really gives you good insight as to what the Mayan Empire would have been like back then.
After that history lesson, it's time for something a little more relaxed. Semuc Champey lies right in the center of Guatemala and is the ultimate escape from the heat of Flores and Tikal. This place is dreamy. It's a bit difficult to explain what is going on here, but in short, the name Semuc Champey means where the river hides under the earth.
So we're standing at a very rare spot here. Basically, there's a river flowing right underneath our feet, and it's pretty mental to be standing here beside a river and it's flowing under you rather than beside you, or overland.
It's a pretty strange sensation to be just chilling out in these gorgeous natural pools, knowing there is a powerful river flowing directly underneath you.
It is not all relaxing though, as to get this view from above, you will need to hike up a steep embankment for around 20 minutes. You will definitely be sweating by the time you return to Earth, and a dip in one of the many pools is the perfect way to cool off. The most important thing we can tell you about this place is go early. The gate opens at 8 AM and we would recommend being there at 7:55.
Just look at this stunning area we had to ourselves. We can assure you that would not have been the case had we arrived a bit later after the tours get there from Lanquin. To ensure you can make it there early, stay at one of the lodges close to Semuc Champey and not in the town of Lanquin, as it takes at least 30 minutes on the back of a wheelie to get there from the town. We stayed in Hostel El Nawal, which is around a 30-minute walk to the entrance, and it was a great spot to base ourselves to go to the pools. We loved it there.
Right then, after a quick stop in Guatemala City, it was time to get into holiday mode because our friends would be arriving soon.
After a few catch-up drinks in Antigua at an Irish bar called The Snug.
Yes, I know it's stereotypical Irish people drinking Irish whiskey in an Irish bar abroad, but don't judge us too harshly, as this place actually has some of the best views of Volcan Agua in the whole city of Antigua.
This towering volcano dominates the backdrop of the gorgeous city of Antigua. After shaking off the hangovers and doing some exploring, we quickly realized Antigua is an incredibly beautiful place. Its cobble streets, colorful colonial buildings, and stunning views of the surrounding volcanoes make it one of the most picturesque places we have been in all of Latin America. It was a great place for Colonel Stephen Jer to start their holiday.
One of our favorite things we did in Antigua was a small hike up to the viewpoint of Cerro de la Cruz. From here you can get a bird's eye view of Antigua and the aforementioned Volcan de Agua. It isn't a tough hike, in fact I don't even know if you could call it a hike, so make sure to put this on your list of things you need to do here. After the catch-ups, beers and light walks, it was time for something more challenging. In fact, very challenging. A hike to the summit of Volcan Acatenango really isn't for the faint-hearted. We chose to go on a tour from a hostel called Tropicana, and that was our starting point. The price of the full tour was around €70 each, which included the transfer to the trailhead, tour guide, food, snacks and accommodation for the night at base camp of the volcano. The price was good, although we did have some problems with the food, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later.
After a hearty breakfast, it was time to set off on our adventure, but there is one thing we didn't mention. The real attraction of climbing Volcan Acatenango is to look across at another highly active volcano called Volcan Fuego, which frequently erupts lava. The night before we were meant to set off on our climb, we heard that Volcan Fuego had just had a massive eruption, the biggest in years, and towns below the volcanoes had been evacuated due to safety concerns.
Yeah man, we're all good here. We're just going to the volcano beside this one tomorrow. Should be sound. Asha still wants to go up. I think we should go up.
The one that's live, the one that's currently erupting live.
This is live on Sky News, but I don't know, we'll give it a chance. I brought good runners.
However, we were assured by the company that it was safe and we would be setting off the next morning, albeit with a little more nervous energy than we would have liked. Was there something unusual yesterday with the volcano?
Not really, it just exploded. And we're a wee bit worried about getting engulfed with lava and just perishing in the rubble of the volcano. Apart from that, I'm having a great morning. Aren't we having a great morning?
Biggest explosion in 5 years. That's all. Oofa.
Let us just say one thing before we continue. The hike to base camp is tough. In fact, it was as tough of a hike as we had ever done.
So if you watched our videos, you know we've done quite a few hikes, but I think this one is the most challenging one because we've been going up like this for 7 kilometers and it's really steep and like it's sandy, so it's challenging. Prepare for that.
The only thing that kept our spirits and energy up was the stunning views from above the clouds.
At this for a view. I've been in a lot of airplanes and I don't think I've seen as good a view from an airplane of the clouds. Like, unbelievable.
As we neared the base camp, we could see the summit of Acatenango and eventually reached our first viewpoint of Volcan Fuego. What a sight. It wasn't even erupting at that stage, but it was still an unbelievable view.
wondering what kind of accommodation you would find at 2,600 meters on the side of a volcano? Well, actually it wasn't bad. We each had a cozy bed to ourselves, even if there were 11 other people in the same cabin. And we're not sure we'll ever have a better view from accommodation again. As the smoke bellowed from Fuego's crater, the setting sun gave us some moments to cherish. Just look at these shots and imagine how blissful it felt.
The worst thing about the sun going down was that with it went the heat. It got pretty cold pretty fast, but our guides did their best to keep us warm with dinner, a glass or two of wine and a dreamy campfire. They even gave us some marshmallows to roast on the fire. It really was dreamy stuff up there that night.
The only thing left to happen on this magical night was a lava eruption. But unfortunately for us, the previous day's massive eruption meant that the volcano had very little left in sight. We only managed to catch a glimpse of a small amount of lava coming from the crater and a lot of smoke.
Bedtime came early as we had one last thing to do before heading back down, and that was to climb to the summit of Volcan Acatenango. To make it up for sunrise, we left camp at 4 AM and made the steep 90-minute hike to the top. That sounds tiring, but the reward was otherworldly. We have seen our fair share of sunrises on our travels, but whoa, this was like something out of a movie, a real pinch-me moment. Several volcanoes pierced the red sky as the sun rose above the clouds. Before committing to this hike, we thought the reason for doing it would be to see Volcan Fuego, but it turned out that the most magical moments came that morning looking out at that sunrise.
What goes up must come down. And trust us, coming down wasn't a piece of cake either. The steep angle and loose terrain made it very uneasy on the footing. We saw people sleep on their arse loads of times. We all made it back in one piece though, and it was an experience none of us will ever forget.
Unfortunately, the only downside to this was, and we have to mention it, I got hit with a nasty bout of food poisoning a few days later, and it was a problem for quite a few others that went on the same tour as us. So I guess you can make your own judgments of whether you want to go with Tropicana or not, but that's just what happened to us in our experience.
There was no time to rest as we had to get ourselves from Antigua all the way to the other side of Lake Atitlan before the end of the day. We took a 4 PM shuttle to Panajachel and just about caught a 7 PM public boat across the lake to make it to our accommodation in San Pedro La Laguna. It was finally time to chill out, and that night we let our hair down around the bars in San Pedro.
Commence collective hangover number 2 of the holiday.
Luckily, we found exactly the right place to shake them off. San Pedro is riddled with nice places to eat and drink, but breakfast in Sababa was our go-to for the few days we spent there. With stunning views overlooking Lake Atitlan and a menu that makes you want to order everything all at once, we really can't think of a better way to spend a relaxing morning by the lake.
When planning a trip to Lake Atitlan, you have quite a few choices when deciding where to stay. We chose San Pedro because we heard it was a nice mix of places to eat and drink, a good nightlife, numerous places to do water activities, and of course stunning views of the lake itself. Other towns on the lake include San Marcos, San Juan, San Antonio, Sununa, the popular Panajachel, and more. When choosing, it really depends on what kind of vibe you're after.
When you choose where you want to stay, it's really easy to get around to visiting the different places on the lake on the public boats, but just make sure you don't get ripped off when paying. Some of the staff can be a wee bit cheeky and try to charge tourists extra, but your journey on the boat should be the equivalent of around €3 or $3. One of our favourite places around the lake was a visit to San Marcos. Once you get off the boat, you'll find a really laid-back, hippie kind of atmosphere with lots of yoga resorts. We enjoyed a walk through the quirky main street and made our way to the popular cliff jumping spot in Cerro San Cujil National Reserve. It has been well documented on this channel that I, quite embarrassingly, am a very weak swimmer. Jer, Steph and Connell were also not comfortable enough in the water to launch themselves off this 12-meter high platform, so it was up to Asia to be the brave one and take the leap. I was so nervous watching her that I kinda missed the landing of her first jump on the camera.
Good, because you have to do it again. I missed it. Thankfully, for the good of my own health, I managed to catch it properly the second time.
This was a really fun place to spend a couple of hours, and don't worry, if you're a scaredy cat like us and don't want to jump from 12 meters, there are a few other spots that are around 4 or 5 meters high and are much more manageable.
The most popular place for tourists at Lake Atitlan is the bustling town of Panajachel. We came here on a boat one morning for a scenic breakfast and a walk around the local markets, but to be completely honest, after visiting Panajachel, we were very glad we had chosen San Pedro as our base instead. The vibe was much nicer there were lots of things to do, and prices seemed a lot lower in San Pedro compared to Panajachel. Speaking of things to do in San Pedro, stand-up paddleboarding was a blast. We rented ours for 50 quetzales each, but be sure not to overpay for this kind of activities because companies do chance their arm to try to get more. We don't usually like bargaining too much, but don't be afraid to bargain with them here to get better prices. A simple sunset swim is also a great way to spend an evening in the gorgeous town of San Pedro.
One last thing, we ate in a lot of places in our few days in San Pedro, and the best place we ate was at a little family-run Indian restaurant called Indian Express. Delicious.
After an amazing few days at Lake Atitlan, the only thing we had left to do was to get back to Guatemala City to catch our flights. I mentioned before that the best way to get around in Guatemala is to book shuttles from one place to another. This is probably the only downside to traveling in Guatemala because it definitely bumps up the price compared to traveling in other countries with competent public bus systems. Luckily, we found a really good shuttle bus company, and we will link the name and number of our guide Tony in the description box below. You might be wondering how long you'd need to complete this full itinerary. Let's say you arrive into Guatemala City Airport to go to Flores and Tikal, Semuc Champey, Antigua, hike volcano Acatenango, and then spend a few days at Lake Atitlan. We would really recommend giving yourself around 2 weeks. If you want to add something else to your itinerary that we didn't do, we suggest the Indian Nose hike at Lake Atitlan, but you will need to give yourself 3 or 4 days for your legs to recover after the Acatenango hike if you're gonna do that. Our legs were still dead for days after, and that's why we didn't go there. But we have heard it is beautiful, especially at sunrise.
Personally, we loved it, and so did Jer, Steph and Connell. We think they had a great week, and yeah, we definitely couldn't recommend Guatemala highly enough if you're looking to go somewhere a little bit different on this holiday.
And tell us your opinion about the whole itinerary. Would you commit to that? And as we said before, please subscribe to the channel, and if you go to Guatemala, we know you're gonna have something to remember, just like us.